Hello, my name is Diego Chavez, and my presentation is titled The War in Yemen. Now, to begin, the conflict has taken over the country of Yemen and resulted in a long-lasting proxy war that involves independent countries, terrorist agencies, governing entities, and corrupt elected officials. Now, the goal of this presentation is to provide background that has resulted in the civil war stalemate that has left major stakeholders to struggle in reversing the situation. We must also address all stakeholders responsible for the humanitarian crisis and how their involvement has led to these course of events. And lastly, we are also here to provide a policy recommendation that hopes to mitigate the long-lasting humanitarian crisis and the civil war that involves a lot of major stakeholders to limit potential civil feuds that may happen in the future. For some background and origins of the conflict, in 2009, Iran supplied the Houthi rebel group in Yemen with military support, funding, and guidance to essentially um, execute their plans against the Saudi Arabian government. In 2011, a major event happened called Arab Springs, where neighboring countries urged resolutions to happen in Yemen, which kind of left Iran and Saudi Arabia to see this as an opportunity to pick sides. In 2011, President Saleh stepped down and transferred political power to President Hadi, which weakened the government. And in 2014, the Houthi rebels made their attack on the Yemeni government, essentially overthrowing the capital. In 2015, there was major events that happened between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels. In March of that year, Mohammed bin Salem led an invasion that cut humanitarian support to Yemen, which also led to major forces such as terrorist forces such as the AQAP and ISS to attack areas in Yemen. And in September, there was an attack done by the Houthi rebels that killed Saudi Arabian soldiers, which was met with a violent attack by the Mohammed bin Salem, launching 130 airstrikes that hit homes, schools, and hospitals, causing a lot of casualties. In 2018, the Southern Transitional Council tried to take power over the southern lands in Yemen with no success. And the current situation in Yemen is that the Yemeni government has fallen, the humanitarian crisis is at its worst. There have been over 377,000 casualties that cause active forces and stakeholders to struggle to come to an agreement and what needs to be done. This is just a map that showcases the Houthi rebels being backed by Iran, bordering Saudi Arabia. Mohammed bin Salem is backed up by the United States forces, and here we see the Southern Transitional Council, other forces such as ISS and AQAP. There are a lot of major stakeholders involved. Now, the current condition and the humanitarian impact on the people, there is an estimated 4.5 million people currently displaced. 4.12 million people are in dire need of humanitarian assistance and protective services. Tens of thousands are already living in famine-like conditions, and a staggering 5 million more are suffering from acute food insecurity. There's also 377,000 direct and indirect deaths caused by the civil war and humanitarian crisis that is very prevalent within Yemen. And again, for international involvement and consequences, Saudi Arabia and the United States, they're both responsible for leading an attack against Houthi forces with military airstrikes, and Iran is responsible for supplying the Houthi forces with military support, guidance, and funding, which basically sparked and initiated this civil conflict. For obstacles in obtaining peace, there are a lot present. For one, the Yemeni government is far too weak, which is caused by the decades of civil feuds, corrupt elected officials, and there are also a lot of political tensions still very prevalent within the area. Additionally, there are too many competing factions over Yemen, Southern Transitional Council, Saudi Arabia, the Yemeni government, the Houthi rebels, and additionally, the influence of Saudi Arabia and Iran has caused a regional proxy war which has resulted in an immense economic collapse and dire humanitarian crisis. For proposed policy implementations, we must hold all major stakeholders responsible and accountable. We must call for a ceasefire between Saudi Arabia and the Houthi rebels to ensure that there is no long-lasting conflict that results in violence. And as for humanitarian aid, medical support, and financial support, Iran should be held responsible as they were the ones who initiated the conflict by supplying the Houthi rebels with military and armed forces. So they should be responsible for supplying that humanitarian support and medical support. And to stabilize the Yemeni government, the United Nations, NATO, and the United States should intervene by providing government reform, establishing safety and peaceful protocols to ensure that no violence is active and develop a democratic government that is similar to a decentralized federal system with power sharing to have states that represent their own beliefs. To incentivize the United States, we must get rid of any Middle Eastern sanctions that support the Houthi organizations to ensure that the United States and Middle East are increasing their relationship, which would incentivize the United States. And this policy proposal hopes to increase the humanitarian aid and address the humanitarian crisis by holding major stakeholders accountable and ensuring that the Yemeni government can have the ability to reform. And just to summarize, these are conclusions and key takeaways as the Yemeni government is in dire need, as their government has been degraded in all aspects of voice and accountability, controlling corruption, government effectiveness, political stability, regulatory quality, and rule of law. And for that reason, international forces must intervene to ensure that the situation in Yemen, the humanitarian crisis, the civil war, are actively being mitigated by international forces. Thank you so much, and these are my references.